Good morning. Once again, welcome to First Christian Church. So pleased that you are all here with us today, either in person or on the live stream. For those of you who may be visiting with us this morning, my name is Rusty Skinner. I'm a local veterinarian, so glad to hear all that puppy talk there, and also an elder of the congregation. Earlier this summer, Pastor Scott asked if I would be willing to share a word with all of you this Sunday, due to Pastor Marcel also being planning to be away on a long-planned family vacation this week. Unfortunately for you all, I agreed. Now, I'm a lifelong member of this church, but lately I've noticed the oddest thing. It seems that there used to be a lot more older folks in the congregation, but now so many people look younger than me. I wonder what could have happened. Well, two things, of course. We have a growing membership with lots of young people in the church, and obviously I'm getting older. And finding myself among the senior set in my church is just one of the many signs of that. In my practice, I more and more frequently hear clients saying something like, "Doc, you're not fixing to retire anytime soon, are you?" And just last week, my wife and I stopped by for a quick dinner in Lexington. When the bill came, it was a little bit less than what I expected. I looked on the receipt and saw that, fortunately, we had been given a senior citizens discount. But unfortunately, we had not asked for one. So I guess there are some perks to this graying hair. Something specific, though, that I've noticed as I've gotten older is this. Many events that to me seem relatively recent actually happened a long time ago. For example, just last month, I read that the movie Back to the Future was celebrating the 40-year anniversary of its release, July of 1985. Now, that really made me feel old. The film, starring then teenage heartthrob Michael J. Fox, was certainly geared to a younger audience than I was then, a mid-20s veterinary student, soon to be married. So you really feel ancient when a teen-oriented movie that came out long after you were a teenager is now 40 years old. Now, I say Back to the Future is a teen movie, but really, it's a good film. It was actually the highest-grossing movie of 1985, and it even won one Academy Award. It's one of those movies you might come across as you're flipping through all the cable channels. Have any of y'all seen the movie Back to the Future? Show hands. Yeah. Okay. It's a good film. It's one that you like. If you haven't seen it, I would look at it sometime. Now, I'm not going to spend too much time on the plot, but in short, what happens is this. Fox plays Marty McFly, a California teenager who is pretty much unhappy with everything in his life. His parents, his siblings, the small town he lives in. But he does have this one special older friend, Doc Brown. Now, Doc Brown is an eccentric, nutty professor type who claims to have modified a DeLorean sports car to work as a time machine. Getting in the car, Marty is accidentally transported alone back 30 years to 1955. He ends up in his same small town and at his same high school, where he must make sure that his parents, who at that time did not know each other, actually meet and fall in love just to ensure his own future existence. Now, there's some plot twists here and there, and since I don't think we need to worry about any spoiler alerts in a 40-year-old film, just know that Marty makes it back to his present time, that is to say the future, of 1985, and life is much brighter than it was before his time travel adventure. So the principal theme of the movie then is this. What happens in the past, decisions made, actions taken, have a significant impact on life in the present. Likewise, things we do and plan in the present day will have an impact in the future, in our lives, our community, and our church. So, what if we had our own time machine this morning, our own modified sports car to take us back 30, 40, even 50 years? Well, thanks to my mother, in a certain way we do. Now, my mom, you see, was a great saver, especially of any kind of paper she thought that might be memorable, Letters, newspaper clippings, church bulletins, you name it, she saved it. When she died 6 years ago at age 96, there were lots and lots of boxes, drawers, and files to go through of such items. And even to this day, we find the occasional odd piece we missed earlier. Such was the case of this paper that I ran across a few months ago while I was actually looking for something else. Serendipity, I suppose. The document is titled, I Wish. And paper copies were made last week, and they were available to you as you came in the sanctuary, or if you didn't grab one, or if they're out, you can pick one on your way out. But also, there's a QR code right here with the sermon title. And you can scan that QR code with your phone, and you can look at the document that way. Now, I realize what I just did there. You now have permission to hold your phone right out in public, there in front of you, and check your socials, your news feed, TikTok, whatever, all while looking like you're just following along with the message. There's no need to lay it down there by your leg on the pew to scroll your Facebook or your Insta. Looking at you, Dixie. When I found this paper, which dates from when I was a high school freshman, I actually instantly remembered it because there was this one item on the list that really made the then 14-year-old version of myself pretty angry. But we'll get to that in a minute. The document is a list, and while I don't recall all the details of how it came about, and I certainly never imagined that at the time that I would be standing in this pulpit 50 years later and speaking about it, the gist of it is this. At a Sunday service in January of 1975, people at church that morning were given an index card with the heading, I Wish, at the top. Worshipers were asked to write down on the card their number one wish for the future of their church, with a promise made to compile all the wishes into a list, unedited, which would then be printed and given back out at church the next Sunday. What I have here in my hand is actually one of the 15-year-old versions of that list. Now, there's 117 responses on the list, and I certainly won't be going through and reading and commenting on each of them. But there are a few that stand out on their own, good or bad, and others that can be grouped together to point out certain thought lines and trends. While most of the replies focus on spiritual thoughts, some deal with very practical matters. Also, while most of them are positive and uplifting, a few members did have negative things to say. I can only assume that the responses were anonymous. Together, they give us a snapshot view of the opinion of folks sitting in these same pews 50 years ago. Let's get some of the bad ones out of the way first. The worst, the one that really made me mad, is number 26. It reads this: I would like the brass rails to be kept clean. When they are clean, they look like a welcome mat. At Christmas, they were only half cleaned. Nate knows better, but he needs to be pushed once in a while. They have been and are a disgrace to the church. Wow. Or as my daughters would say, rude. Nate was Nate Kelly, the longtime custodian of the church, known, of course, to me as Mr. Kelly. I was appalled then, and remain so today, that someone was that focused on a cosmetic concern as their number one wish for their church, and especially to call out someone by name in such a negative way. Mr. Kelly had been with the church for decades and was such a kind, older gentleman. Yeah, he was pretty aged, so chances are his brass polishing skills weren't what they once were, but still, you just don't say things like that. Now, as an aside, I also remember this. While I was still a teenager and in high school, Nate Kelly was recognized at a Sunday service for being the church custodian for 50 years. So clearly, he was pretty old in 1975. When he walked down the aisle to receive the plaque or whatever it was he was given that morning, that was the first time I had ever heard this congregation clap for anything or anyone. And it was several years before I ever heard clapping again. Now that gives you an idea of how formal worship was in those days. And I think we can all be thankful that we're pretty frequent to clap in our church now. Now that formality, or lack thereof, was actually addressed in some of these responses. Number 106 wished that people would not be so formal and more open. Number 12 said church should be more friendly and not so formal. On the other hand, response number 45 said the service should be made more formal. And number 47 went so far as to say that they wish people wouldn't talk to each other before church. Now, in fairness, I suppose some worshipers view that as a time for meditation and quiet preparation, but I really don't see that happening with our congregation. We all like to chat and catch up with each other on a Sunday morning. Now, Terry, Ashley, and Alex will likely be interested to know that even in 1975, responder number 42 wanted the church to sing some of the old songs. Yeah, that was 50 years ago. They wanted the old songs. But number 39 wished that the choir would continue to sing the Battle Hymn of the Republic. So obviously that's been a long-term tradition of the church, and one I think we all want to continue. There are certainly some differences of opinion of the minister at the time, who would have been the Reverend Monroe Grant. One respondent said that they like to hear the preacher preach. He does very fine preaching. Another wished that we would keep our minister and his fine family. Still another said, may we always have Brother Grant as our minister. One responder said there should be more preaching by the minister and not so much by lay leaders or the congregation. I hope they're not here today. On the other hand, one person wished the Lord would inspire the minister to preach more dynamic sermons. I guess his were pretty dull, or they thought his were pretty dull. Another wished that the minister would not use the offering money for his pay. The wish of responder number 30 was a simple 2 words: new minister. Obviously, you can't make everyone happy. So let's leave those few negative responses behind and focus on the majority of replies, which were more uplifting and encouraging. Congregational fellowship, especially involving food, was clearly popular, being mentioned in at least 11 of the 117 wishes. These range from a Sunday coffee hour to a men's breakfast to a church picnic to more evening potlucks. Now, I'm definitely down for any of those. Love a potluck. 2 respondents wished that the church would have a dance. I'm guessing that those were probably some of my fellow high schoolers at the time. School dances actually used to be a pretty big thing. Church growth and attendance were also important to the congregation in 1975, being mentioned in no fewer than 31 of people's wishes, actually making it the most frequently mentioned category on the list. These included both wishes for better attendance of the existing membership, as well as adding new members to the church, especially reaching out to the unchurched in the local community. It's interesting to note that importance, when you consider that at the time, First Christian was generally considered to be the largest congregation in the county. This is a time before the bypass existed, and the community just had the downtown churches and the smaller rural churches out in the county. Speaking of the community, outreach was very important to many members as well, being the subject of many of the wishes. There was an especially strong desire for more local outreach here in the community. But with that said, one responder, number 65, actually wished to decrease the outreach program. Again, you can't please everyone. I think it's important to note that how many wishes from 1975 are realities in 2025. More local outreach was one wish, or many wishes. We, of course, are very involved in the food pantry. We spearheaded the newly opened warming center in town, so check. Carpeting in the balcony, check. New carpet upstairs. I assume that means the 3rd floor, check. Improved lighting for the sanctuary, check. A handbell choir, check. A church bus, well, kind of check. We had one, but we realized we didn't have too many folks with the CDL certification that could drive it, but we do have a really nice large van. Extra hymnals for the sanctuary. Check. We got them, but we rarely use them. I wonder if folks back then would have thought of a giant screen with PowerPoint lyrics. Improved facilities for children and youth. Check many times. Many enhancements have been made to the upstairs youth rooms over the years. The outdoor playground was added, and we are soon to build a great new nursery on the same floor as the sanctuary. A very big one, number 17, air conditioning. People under a certain age have no remembrance of sitting in these pews, which also did not have cushions back then, on a hot August morning like this. There would have been a little breeze coming through the small openings in the stained glass windows. Now, who knew these windows could actually open? The two little squares at the bottom and the one little square at the top, they used to have a chain on the top and a chain on the bottom, and the window actually pivoted like this, with the top coming in and the bottom going out. Those protective screens on the outside weren't there then. So they could be open, and on a hot summer morning, that was the only breeze that came in. There was no AC. So we would have been sitting there with a little bit of a breeze, and we would all been fanning ourselves furiously with these little handheld fans that have Bible pictures on one side and an ad for the Easton Ritchie Funeral Home on the other. And still, we'd be sweating like crazy. So Pastor Scott, I'm sure you're watching. I can't imagine how many handkerchiefs you'd be going through on a summer Sunday morning without this little bit of progress. On a more serious note, other wishes from 1975 were that women deacons should be increased and the calling of women elders should be considered. Now, it's hard to believe that that was even once a thing. It's not too many years after that Fannie Henry and Sarah May Howe were called as the congregation's first woman elders. And for many decades now, women have participated equally in all aspects of church life and leadership: diaconate, eldership, congregational officers, and called clergy. This is an area that our congregation has always truly led in, and something in which I think we should all take pride. Like I said, the vast majority of replies on this list do indeed involve matters of Christian faith: Bible study, prayer, evangelism, spirituality, love, and devotion. A thoughtful reading of these 117 wishes is convincing that they come from a group of good but imperfect people who love their neighbor and love their God. The same type of people who are here this morning. Our focus scripture from Hebrews this morning reminded us that we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses. Now, what does that term mean? It's not the cloud, a concept that I'm afraid I'm too old to really understand when it comes to IT. This cloud of witnesses are our predecessors in the faith. For the early Christians to whom the message of Hebrews is directed, it refers to those Old Testament figures with whom they were all familiar. To us today, the term includes these biblical figures as well as all those who have claimed Christ as their Savior for the past 2,000 years. Specifically for our church, these witnesses are the members of this congregation since its beginnings nearly 230 years ago, who have been worshiping God in this very building for nearly 100 years. It certainly includes those who gathered here on a January Sunday morning 50 years ago in 1975 and filled out a card with their wishes, their hopes, and their dreams for the future of their church. Our scripture this morning also calls on us to run with perseverance the race that is set out before us. These wishers from 1975 certainly did so. The thriving congregation we all belong to today is evidence of that. We owe a debt of gratitude to them for fulfilling so many of their wishes that have resulted in the active church that blesses us all. Now, we have the opportunity today, or in the next few days, to share our own wishes, our dreams for this church, both now and in the future. In your bulletin, there's a little tear out where you can just tear that part off and you can just write your wish right there with a pen, or you can scan the other QR code that's here. I think it'll be up on the screen, or it's been up on the screen, or it will be on the church Facebook page, and you can submit your answer electronically. Like I said, that option's available on the Facebook page for those of you who are joining us online. Either way, if you'd rather take some time to consider your wishes, please do so. The links will remain active for a while, or you can bring the paper back next Sunday. In a few weeks, the church will gather and publish these wishes so that we can all share in them. And who knows, someone else may run across this list in 2075 and marvel at how different and how very much the same church life was 50 years in the past. So in closing, I'd like to read aloud the very last wish on the list, number 117. In my opinion, the best was saved for last. Now, I sort of have to wonder if it was written by the pastor, but my hope is that it came from just a regular member, someone like you or me, who had a very good grasp on the message of the gospel. Number 117 reads this: my wish for the church is the same as for our whole religion, to accentuate the positive, to emphasize love instead of duty, growth instead of security, faith instead of fear, progress instead of tradition, God's understanding instead of wrath. How can we possibly reflect glory on Him as cowering, anxious, inhibited, whining children? By the way, I think this card was an excellent idea, and Sunday services were refreshingly different. I think that's a pretty good way to end it. Thank you all so much for listening.